again, high schoolers. Thank you so much for joining me. If you don't know who I am, my name is Miss Christine, and I'm the Director of Student Ministries here at Grace Lutheran Ministries in Menominee Falls, Wisconsin. Thank you so much for being here to talk about anxiety. It's not the funnest of topics, but I think God has a lot to say about anxiety. And I don't have to be the one to tell you that being in middle school or high school is difficult. But being in middle school or high school during a global pandemic, it's especially difficult. If I had you make a list of the top 5 things that are challenging about being in middle school or high school right now, what would be on that list? I obviously can't ask you what is on your list, but I'm guessing a lot of them can be boiled down to the same idea: pressure. Your world has a lot of pressure. Maybe you feel the pressure of doing well in school, in sports, and every other extracurricular activity. Maybe you feel it from your parents, guidance counselors, and even yourself when you consider what's next in your life, what college to go to, or what high school to go to. Maybe you feel it in the form of social media comparison. If you're like most of us, that pressure feeds a fear of never measuring up, never being in the group of friends you want, never getting the date you want, and never having the sense of belonging that you desire. Many of you are familiar with the words stress and anxiety. You probably use them casually when talking about what you want to wear or what movie you want to watch. But you also feel them when you're trying to sleep at night, when you sit down and take a test you forgot about, when you get asked by an adult what you're doing with the rest of your life, when you think about when you will be able to see your friends again or what this summer will look like. You've probably felt anxiety before. Unfortunately, it's kind of like a hot topic, a trend that's everywhere in your world nowadays. The crazy thing is, we experience it in so many different areas of our life that we often don't even notice it. It becomes a natural part of our existence. And if we do notice it, we wonder a few questions. Some of those questions might be, is this anxiety? Or is it just a little bit of stress? Is this normal anxiety? Or is it overload? Do I need to get help? Or am I taking small things and blowing them out of proportion? Do I need to just get over it? When a car is close to running out of gas, the low fuel light comes on, usually accompanied by an annoying beeping sound. That is a warning sign that says, hey, get to the gas station and fill up now. What are the warning signs when it comes to anxiety? How do we know that we're in the danger zone? Because maybe you found yourself there a few of these weeks. Well, unfortunately, it's not as simple as a fuel level in a car. You're a human being. You're dealing with a mixture of circumstances, personalities, influences, hormones, and mental patterns, just to name a few. Every person is different. So it's not as easy to recognize the warning signs of anxiety in everyone. But there are some symptoms that when you identify them, it can serve as a red flag. For example, when the pressure on your chest is so heavy that you feel like you can't breathe. Have you ever had that happen? Maybe it's nighttime, you're trying to fall asleep, but you can't because your mind is racing so fast. It feels like you're running on a treadmill and you just can't stop. Maybe there are knots in your stomach and you feel like you just can't focus on anything else. Or you have a tough time relaxing most of the time because you just kind of feel always on edge. What do you do then? What's normal? What's not normal? And more importantly, can you avoid these awful feelings? Or is this just the way that life is supposed to be? The thing about stress and anxiety is that there are some answers, but they can be different for nearly everybody. That being said, some of what we say tonight might be helpful for you, and some of it may not be for you right now. Just know that our goal, as always, is to help you as much as possible because we love and we care about you. To start, let's make sure we're on the same page about the differences between stress and anxiety. What's the difference? And yes, they are very, very different things, but here's an easy way that you can think about it. Stress is specific. It's a reaction to an actual situation, like the pressure you feel over an upcoming test or a big game. Stress is usually short term. When the specific thing that we're stressed about passes, the stress usually will go away. Anxiety, however, is not specific. It's more like a reaction to the world as a whole. Anxiety is something you feel all the time about all things. It's a general feeling of unease or fear that doesn't go away, even when the stressful circumstance does pass away. Contrary to what you may think, both stress and anxiety can actually be a good thing. That's why it's created in the first place. Stress helps us to accomplish what we need to accomplish. It pushes us to get better and to work hard. And there's nothing wrong with that. Anxiety comes from the same fear part of our brain that puts us on high alert when there's danger nearby, like when we're about to get hit by a bus or fall off a cliff. We need that part of our brain. But anxiety becomes a problem when it sticks around for too long and is no longer helpful for our brains. When there's no danger that we need to pay attention to, but our mind and our body is acting like there is. Or when we're constantly creating new situations in our head to fear and be anxious about. We need to know that that's not how we're designed to work. In fact, when we live with constant anxiety, our body creates a stress hormone that is pumped through our entire body that keeps us on high alert. And living like that for a long period of time eventually wears you down and wears you out. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. At that point, anxiety isn't helpful for pointing out danger. It is just hurting you. It's keeping you from functioning in normal life, the way that God would want you to. So the question is, what do you do about it? If you feel anxious almost all the time, what are your options? Well, you probably know some of these, but you can go talk to a friend. You can go for a run. You can take a nap. You can lay off the energy drinks. You can practice breathing exercises or get a breathing app. You can meet with a counselor and get some therapy. And the list goes on and on and on. Like we already mentioned, coping will look different for everybody. But for the next few minutes, we're going to look at one thing that everyone can do when you feel stressed or anxious. Or maybe your feelings are just getting away from you. See, anxiety is not a new problem, even though it might feel like a trend happening right now. It's a human problem. So even though it feels intensely personal, and it makes you feel like no one else knows what you're experiencing, you can rest assured that you aren't the first, and you won't be the last. And you definitely aren't alone in this. That's why I love the book of Psalms. There are several different types of literature in the Bible, but the book of Psalms is like a book of poetry. But in some cases, it's like a journal. It's written by real people who gave us specific insight into what they were actually feeling. Here enter Psalm 56. Psalm 56 is a poem written by David, who was probably the most famous king of Israel. We're told that this psalm was written when David was captured in Gath by the Philistines. In hindsight, we know that David lived through this experience. But at the time that he wrote it, David didn't know that. So who knows how much stress and anxiety he was feeling? He wrote this: "Be merciful to me, my God, for my enemies are in hot pursuit. All day long, they press their attack. My adversaries pursue me all day long." From Psalm chapter 56, verses 1 through 2. David's enemies are out to literally kill him. He would be crazy not to be afraid. But notice what he does here. He names the thing that he is stressed about. That's such an important part of this. One of the trickiest things about anxiety is that it makes you feel powerless. It puts a general fear feeling in your heart, and that's a hard thing to get rid of. How do you get over anxiety that doesn't tell you to be afraid of anything specific, just the world in general? David starts by getting specific. So, are you feeling stressed? Are you feeling overwhelmed? Are you feeling anxious? Name what you are feeling. But David doesn't end there. He says, "When I'm afraid, I put my trust in you. In God, whose word I praise. In God I trust and am not afraid. What can mere mortals do to me?" That's from Psalm chapter 56, verses 3 through 4. Check out what David does here. He moves the focus from what's making him afraid to the God that he trusts in. His circumstances don't change, but his focus does. His situation does not shift, but his perspective does. And that's really important because sometimes the thing that causes us to feel overwhelmed is something we can't control. Virtual school is a reality. Canceled trips and summer plans is a reality. Parents arguing is a reality. Friends turning on us is a reality. Those things don't always go away like a test does once you've taken it. When life doesn't change, the one thing we can change is what we do with and how we respond to the stress and anxiety that life brings us. We can bring that stress and anxiety to God. We can acknowledge what we're feeling. We can name it. We can name why it bothers us. And then we can shift our focus to something else that is a reality, which is God's role in it all. Think of it this way. When we're stressed or anxious, it can be helpful to name the what, the why, and the who. Here's what I mean. I'm willing to guess that there have been times in your life, in the middle of things, when you would start to get stressed about the future. Now, imagine that during that kind of stress, you pray, God, this crisis has taken away my sense of control and normalcy. You're acknowledging what is causing the stress. And then, I'm afraid my summer plans will be affected. I hate not seeing my friends, or I'm struggling with learning online. That's why that situation is causing you stress. And finally, you can say, God, I know even if my life feels out of control, you are in control. Even if no one else seems to care, you do. Even if things change, you never change. That's who God is. So this is how simple it is. Name the what, name the why, then shift your focus and name the who God is. In anxious times, this can help. Will it fix everything? Probably not. But it can help you see clearly. The idea is to form a habit of focusing on truth and gaining a perspective larger than your current one. It will help you train your mind to get out of the rut of worry, stress, and anxiety. Think of it this way. These are the tools to take on anxiety. David knew what we know, that life can be overwhelming. We will face things we don't feel prepared to face, like this. We will get stuck in negative thoughts, paralyzed by anxiety, stressed about things we can't control, and fearful over what we can do about it all the time. But over time, David figured out that it did him no good to stay stuck there. So he modeled a way through with tools that can help us. See, when it comes to stress and anxiety, there's no one-size-fits-all cure. There are lots of good and acceptable tactics to help us cope. And that's okay. But what's not okay is living with anxiety that holds you back from what you really want your day-to-day life to look like, all while keeping it to yourself. That's why we want to begin the conversation. If your stress or anxiety has begun to take over, we want you to know that this church, is one of the safest places to talk about it. And if you have a conversation with your small group leader, your parents, or me, here's what won't happen. They won't say, just have more faith. They won't say, wow, nobody else feels like that, or you have nothing to be stressed about. In fact, you can expect that your small group leader, parent, or me, whoever you want to reach out to, will encourage you, and they'll help you figure out what your next step should be. Because stress and anxiety is a part of being a middle schooler or a high school student, most of the time. But in these circumstances, it can be especially tough. So open up and reach out. As we wrap up this lesson on anxiety, no matter where you are and what you are feeling, stuck in anxiety, stuck in stress, or not in the middle of that right now, be aware that seasons like that are likely to come up. They're either here now or they will be in the future. And you need to know that you aren't and won't be helpless. There are tools to take on anxiety. There are people to walk with you. There are ways forward. And there is a God who is absolutely crazy about you and will be with you through it all. So we are rooting for you, and always remember that Jesus loves you so much.